Just wanted to introduce our guest for the day, Rex Lingwood, who is an internationally known leather artist, but he also is a very, very talented metal sculptor as well as a woodworker. So he combines the essence of all the sculpture that I like to look at. So as I said before, I met Rex. I knew about his mother because I worked with actually Joyce over there at Tandy Leather, and we had some of her beautiful pins, flowers, and so forth in the store for sale. So I got interested in that, and then I saw pictures of Rex's work. I never did meet him back in those days, and in some of the international magazines and things, I certainly spotted his work as something that I really liked and appreciated. So we've asked him to come here today, and I can't tell you very much about him because it doesn't tell very much about when he started and how he started and so forth. So I hope you'll tell us about that as we go along. Rex Lingwood.
Do you know what that is? Does anybody know what that is? Okay.
Well, the big leather stuff that I've done, generally referring to a drying oven temperature of more than about 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
A drying temperature. Yeah, well, that's sort of getting into the ballpark, and the reason that it's a drying temperature, and why you don't want to go too much beyond 140 degrees Fahrenheit, is because when you heat leather in the presence of water, yeah, you know, it shrinks. And it begins to change its structure. I will switch to centigrade, so or Celsius, whichever you prefer. And for vegetable tanned leather, shrinkage happens between about 70 degrees C and about 80 degrees C. It varies depending on the tanning. But for what I do, yeah, that's not too much of a concern. I tend to work at about 85 to 90 degrees C because that promotes the change and promotes shrinkage, but allows me enough time to control just how much the leather changes. And what all these things you see here, or these three things you see here, other things I'll show you later, do is they exploit the fact that the leather shrinks. And depending on the part of the hide that it comes from, it will shrink from about 5 to 40%. Now, the leather I've got here, which is what I'm going to use, is part of the shoulder. It's down near the leg. So it is fairly loose in fiber structure. It will, so it should shrink quite a bit. Now I'm going to use this jig as part of it. This thing is about 2 inches bigger than the jig. I'm hoping it will not shrink too much more than that. It's unpredictable. And so that we'll see what happens. But what I'm doing for this, which is going to be a bowl form, not quite like that, but sort of using the same principles, is I shrink the leather first, and then I put it on the jig, and then I stretch it. Now, the advantage of that is that, you know, I stretch parts of it, other parts of it are quite stay as they are. So it allows certain kinds of forms to emerge from that, depending how much it shrinks. Now you can stretch it back slightly more than you've shrunk it. But you have to be very careful, because if you start to stretch it back too much, it'll break apart. What happens when you shrink the leather is it begins to change its structure. And when it cools, it gets hard, and if you try to move it while it's hardening like that, it'll start to, the surface will start to crack and do various things. I'll try to keep it fairly straightforward, but if I'm losing you, or if there are things that I'm not telling you that need to know, please ask, because you know, it's if you end up not asking, you'll be out of luck. Okay, so we have the water heated there at about, well, we'll see how much it is at this point. Pretty much turned it off. We're hot enough. Yeah.
This is quite a small pan that Rex has here. Back at his shop, he has a very large gas-fired one that he can do the full hides for chairs and things.
Okay. Well, since that was just boiling, I figure it'll be enough. If not, well, there it goes. Now, what I usually do is I roll and break the hide just to make sure it gets the water really into the fiber. Because when you're using this is 8-9 ounce veg tan cowhide. The heat works on the surface, and the surface starts to change. The collagen changes its structure, but the fiber remains in the center. So it works a bit like fiberglass. So you have a resin that makes things hard. You have a fiber that keeps it together. Now there are limits to that, but that's the theory. Now, if you want to come up and look while I'm doing this, please do. Because you will see that, well, we'll hope that it's going to begin to shrink. You can see that it's beginning to change at the edges. Yeah.
The grain itself shrinking?
Yeah, the grain side shrinks first, so it curls in like that. Now, for this one, I'm just, you can see the other side there. Yeah, you see now it's gotten quite small. Let's go in. Well, it will shrink between 5 and 40%, depending on where it comes from. Like if you went from along the back, closer to 5%, but down here it's going to shrink more than that.
And the belly would be the
Yeah, the belly. This is down near the leg, on the shoulder.
So will the belly shrink more?
It depends.
Oh,
The leg is
Muscle is about to.
Yeah.
So you have to keep working it like that when it's in water?
well, I just sort of spread it out so that it gets fairly even. Like in this case, the center is, not quite cooked enough.
And are you trying to find, Rex, more shrinkage is better because then you can manipulate it more out again? Is that sort of what you're
Well,
looking for?
in this case, I do full shrinkage.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, if I leave it long enough, it'll flatten out again because it'll have shrunk all the way through. I have to be careful. Not the last time, but the second last time I did one of these, I got overly ambitious in my stretching and I pulled that little knob right through the bottom. It's most embarrassing.
Does your tongue, does that mark the leather all up?
No, not really. If I'm careless, probably. But when it's like this, the leather is in fact elastic.
Yeah, oh, I see.
So it doesn't really. So I think we're there.
That's what we're always taught. You
Well, that
can't
really
get any
did shrink.
fingernail
Yeah.
marks on there.
Oh yeah, no, it's somewhat different. It's somewhat different in that respect. Okay. Now, here we'll see how we've done. You can see that these sides are roughly equal. That one's not so equal to the others. So that one shrunk a lot. So that would have been out near the leg. And let's see, how are we going to do this? And we'll hope that I can. Okay. Now, we'll hope that this air stapler actually continues to work. It's on its last legs. I have a backup, but it's very much easier if I do it with this.
Rex, would you say that's about average time that you had it in the water?
It might be a little more than usual because usually when I do this, I actually have a temperature control gauge or a thermometer on the tank, so it's a little bit easier to use. This leather seems to be behaving a little differently too. And it may be that I've just not, because the water isn't as hot as I might usually have it, it's cute.
Oops. Right.
Sorry.
It's okay then?
Fine. And whoops. Didn't
How are your hands after you finish one of these? A little sore?
Oh, they're not too bad. It's back when I used to use the hands to manipulate this rather than tools, that I ended up with a lot of osteoarthritis in my fingers. Fortunately, over the 30 years since I gave that up, I recovered.
And what would have happened to the leather if we had thrown it in a pot that was 120 degrees Celsius? It just won't respond. You damaged it to the point where it
No,
will
100 degrees is, well, that's shrinkage temperature, chrome tan. And the only way you can actually get it to that temperature is in an autoclave. Because you can't, it doesn't,
Water boils.
water boils and
okay.
it doesn't raise the temperature anymore.
So water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, guys?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so let's say you put it at, it got to 100, it was boiling.
Yep.
Have we damaged the leather? Like-
No.
Okay,
No, it would just move, it'd just go faster.
okay.
Just turn that off. Now,
Is there any time when you can change the structure of the leather to the point where it just falls apart?
yes. You can boil it till it becomes glue.
Okay.
You can boil it till the fiber structure's changed. It's just elastic, and you can just pull it out. The surface will craze and split, and it'll get sort of translucent. If you staple it onto something flat like that, it will, when it dries, it'll shatter. Now, in order to hold it into this place, I'm going to put, I hope, this is one I just made this. The one I left the one I was going to use in New Zealand, so the last time I did this, so.
I'll go get it for you.
Yeah. So I made a new one, so it's a little different, but we'll just see how it works. So we'll just stick the whole thing in here again. In order to work with this material, it has to be hot and wet. As soon as it starts to cool, it starts to get harder. Here, this is beginning to, just pass this around, it's beginning to firm up.
The specific kind of wood you use so you can put it in the water, or it doesn't really matter?
This is ash, and I use it because I have a lot of it. Because I've got dying ash trees on my property.
Oh, yeah. We've got those too.
I also have lots of maple and cherry and various other things, but that's, for these I use that, and then I used to have various sort of outside slabs of cherry and stuff like that I used to cut up for these things.
So you make them frequently? How long would a frame last? How many bowls would you make?
Well, I sometimes reuse them. When I get to the slides, or to the images, you'll see to a degree what happens. I tend to cut them apart and then use them in different ways. And that's kind of what, that's too tight at this point. Yeah.
Why did you have to case it in water before you put it in the boiling water?
Well, because then you use the water to conduct the heat into the center of the material, into the center of the leather. If you put it in dry, then the hot water goes in very quickly and changes it very quickly, or it seals the surface a bit, and then the center doesn't get wet. So it's much better to have it very wet, and that gives you more control over what you're doing, because it slows down the process of change. And again, that's why I typically work at between 85 and 90 degrees C, particularly for things like the chairs and the thing, because it takes less time. It slows the process down enough that you can see what's actually happening and pull it out before it goes too far. Because if you boil it, heat it too much, then it gets very brittle. I mean those legs on the side, I wouldn't drop it because they'll break. But I have had some, that have had horrendous falls and have been repairable. Like off a second floor railing or something like that. So you can do that. Okay.
Rex, has this changed the nature of the leather to the point where you're not doing any more surface embellishment or tooling on it?
You couldn't do tooling, you could carve it. And, depending on, one of the reasons I have all those ribs in this thing is that in addition to improving the structure of the rim, it is a surface embellishment. That one is complicated. There's another one here. I'll bring this one up, pass around. Well, we'll go on here. This one is using somewhat similar approach, except of course this one was the jig here was circularly ribbed, not hex, and that's sort of the route we're going here. Now that one was one where I cut this jig apart and then used it somewhat differently than what I'm doing here.
Would there be a chance of it cracking and breaking along timelines? Would they expand much wider as it dried?
Sorry, no.
If you were doing surface decoration by carving, would you find that the cuts would open up more? Would you chance?
Yes, it would. I've done some sort of, I wouldn't call it carving, but sort of incising on some bowls after they've been stretched, but when they're still wet, and that's what, when it's still under pressure, then you cut it with a knife, it opens. And then the other thing is I take the torch and help it along, because that, you wet it, release it's hot and wet again, so it moves. Okay. Now, I think we've got this right. We'll see how it's going to go. Okay. Oh, no, got that one the wrong way.
Basically saying is the hotter and the wetter you can get it in there and start clamping, the better it will be.
Well, yeah, you have to keep it hot enough so that it still moves. So it's not hard.
It's starting to get hard.
But it is starting to get hard now, and I'm going to dump it back in there before I put it over this. But you don't want to heat it so much as to change it more than you already have. So, you know, what happens is, I mean, I use that big torch to keep things warm, but I'm also spraying it at the same time. So I'm forcing heated water